Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to another Season 8 League of Legends Champion Guide. Today I'll be covering top lane Nasus, the Curator of the Sands.
The cycle of life and death continues. We will live, they will die.
Alright, so let's start off this Champion Guide by looking at Nasus's pros and his cons. So first off the top, Nasus has an amazing late game and scales infinitely, so the longer a game goes, the stronger a Nasus will get. He's great in 1v1s, especially in the late game where he's going to be a very tanky champion, yet do a lot of damage. He'll destroy towers really quickly as well with his Q ability and of course a Sheen, and has built-in sustain that comes from his passive. Finally, Nasus is a very tanky champion, especially in his ultimate. He gets a bunch of bonus resists and a bunch of health as well, making him a very hard to bring down champion. Now Nasus, however, is pretty bad in the early game. He's not going to have that much damage, and he's not going to be very tanky either. He also doesn't really have any sources of mobility as well, so he's rather easy to kite. Then of course Nasus needs to focus on getting his Q stacks. If he's unable to acquire these throughout the game, he's not going to be that late game powerhouse that he does have the chance to be. Then finally, he's also a pretty mediocre team fighter. Sure, he's pretty damn tanky in his ultimate, and he does do a lot of damage if he can get to targets, but the fact that he's easy to kite is a big issue. For my runes, I like to go for Inspiration and Resolve, grabbing Kleptomancy as my keystone. This will make it so whenever you use your Q ability and attack the enemy champion, you will be granted extra gold and sometimes even consumables. Then go for Biscuit Delivery, so you're granted a free biscuit every 3 minutes until 12 minutes to increase your sustain just a little bit more, and then go for Magical Footwear so you get free boots at 10 minutes. I then like to get Celestial Body just so I'm a little tankier in the early game. I'll then go into the Resolve side by grabbing Conditioning so I get a bunch of armor and magic resist, and then Second Wind so I return some of my health when I am damaged. This is, however, a pretty greedy rune setup, and you could go for Grasp of the Undying instead if you wanted some extra sustain, but whenever you can, I would go for Kleptomancy. For your summoner spells, I'd recommend always sticking with Flash and Teleport. Nasus doesn't have a ton of mobility, so Flash is a great way to escape a bad situation, or get on top of a squishy enemy so you can one-shot them in the late game with your Siphoning Strike. He's very kiteable, but Flash can help you get into the fight. I'd then recommend taking Teleport because Nasus needs to be near farm as much as possible so he can get his Siphoning Strike huge. He'll be able to sit in the lane for large portions of the game farming, and then join teamfights and objectives when he's needed by using his Teleport. Of course, this is also just great to get back into lane or use to teleport gank. Now let's kick off your abilities by looking at your passive Soul Eater, which is great for its added sustain. So for the passive, Nasus permanently has between 10 and 20% bonus lifesteal. Since Nasus is a fairly weak champion in the early game, this is actually a pretty strong passive for him because it gives him some source of extra sustain so he doesn't just get shoved out of the lane over and over again. As long as you're able to hit minions every now and again and farm up your Q ability, you will be getting a bunch of life back, and you should be fine in the lane phase. In those late game team fights, since your Q ability should be hitting fairly hard, it'll actually be giving you a big chunk of life back whenever you pull one off. Your ultimate does also reduce the cooldown of your Q ability, so you're going to be using it very often, and you're going to be getting a lot of health back. It's a pretty strong passive, and it's great at all stages of the game. Your Q ability is Siphoning Strike, which is your main source of damage that gets better and better as you stack it. When activated, Nasus' next basic attack within 10 seconds has plus 25 range and deals bonus physical damage. If Siphoning Strike kills its target, Nasus permanently gains 3 stacks, doubled to 6 if the victim is a champion, large monster, or large minion. Siphoning Strike also resets Nasus' auto attack timer. So this is your main source of damage, but you have to be using it to farm as much as possible. Use it to last hit minions over and over again because you will be granted 3 stacks every time, and the damage of this ability is based off those stacks. Since you can use it rather often, it's great with a Sheen and works fantastic with Kleptomancy. In between those last hits, if there is no low minions, you want to try to use this ability on the enemy champion to get that extra gold and sometimes a potion. Stacking it is very, very important because as long as you do it in the early and the mid game, you're going to be a monster in the late game. Your W ability is Wither, which is a really strong slowing ability that also cripples the enemy. When activated, Nasus ages the target enemy champion, slowing them by 35%, increasing over 5 seconds, and crippling them by half the amount for the duration. So for those people that don't know, a cripple is when you reduce somebody's attack speed, so of course this is a really strong ability against attack speed heavy champions like a Tryndamere or any AD carry out there. This also kind of helps Nasus escape if he is getting ganked because he can use this on the enemy coming towards him, provide a really nice slow on them, and then run away. It's of course really strong in offensive situations as well because Nasus is a fairly immobile champion, and this will help you keep on top of the target. In those late game team fights, you will want to use this on an auto attack heavy champion to reduce their damage as much as you can. Your E ability is Spirit Fire, which does some nice AoE damage and also reduces the target's armor. When activated, Nasus unleashes a Spirit Flame at the target location, dealing magic damage to enemies in the area. The flame then remains for 5 seconds, dealing magic damage every second to all enemies within and reducing their armor while they remain, lingering for 1 second. So although this ability is based off your ability power, which Nasus isn't really going to have on this build, it's still a really strong ability because of that reduced armor. If you can get this on multiple champions in a team fight, your team is going to do a lot more damage against them. Of course, when you combine this with your Q ability, you're going to be taking big chunks out of tanks as well. Even though, like I said, it is ability power based, it does have some pretty decent base damage on it, so if you have to push a lane really quickly to try to take a tower, it's great in that situation as well. Your ultimate is Fury of the Sands, which gives you a really nice chunk of added tankiness and also increases your damage. When activated, Nasus empowers himself for 15 seconds, gaining bonus health, armor, and magic resist, increased size, and 50 range on his basic attacks for the duration. While Nasus is empowered, he deals magic damage to all enemies around him each second, capped at 240, gains bonus armor and magic resist each second, and reduces Siphoning Strike's cooldown by 50%. So this right now is an incredibly strong ultimate on Nasus because he gets all that bonus health and a bunch of extra resistances, making him a very tanky champion. This also deals 5% of the target's maximum health every second as well, so it does a ton of AoE damage in a clumped up team fight. The best part of the ability, however, is the fact that Siphoning Strike's cooldown is reduced by 50%, so you can pump out an insane amount of damage with your Q ability. As long as you don't get crowd controlled and you can start hitting that Q ability over and over again, you're going to pump out an insane amount of damage. For your skill order, you first want to put a point into your ultimate whenever you can at 6, 11, and 16. You'll then want to focus on maxing your Q ability first because the cooldown goes down every time you put a point in the ability, allowing you to stack it just a little bit quicker. You'll then want to focus on maxing your E ability second because it will do some nice AoE damage and also reduce the target's armor, allowing you to do more damage. Then you'll finally want to save your W ability for last, but make sure you take a point in the ability at level 4 so you can actually slow and cripple your enemies. This will allow you to walk out of bad situations and of course stick onto targets with that slow that it does provide. Nasus has a fairly weak lane phase early on, so you'll probably have to play rather cautiously. Try and focus on stacking your Siphoning Strike as much as possible during the lane phase so you'll be a really strong champion in the mid and late game. If you took Kleptomancy and an Ancient Coin at the start, you'll want to try to hit the enemy champion with a Siphoning Strike in between those last hits as well for additional gold and potions. Nasus is also a champion that's pretty easy to farm on under tower, so if you can, let the enemy push the lane and farm safely under your own tower until you're strong enough to fight them. Stack that Q ability, get your Trinity Force, and start destroying them. In teamfights, you want to be a tanky frontliner for your team. You'll be a very hard to take down champion when you're in Fury of the Sands because of all that additional resistances and bonus health. It also deals magic damage based on champion's maximum health, so it will deal a lot of damage to those enemy tanks that are also on the front line. If you do see an opportunity, however, make sure you're using your Siphoning Strike on any squishy carries near you to take out a big chunk of their health. It will be rather spammable during your ultimate because of the 50% reduced cooldown, so use it as much as you can. You'll then finally want to make sure you drop your Spirit Fire on the enemies to reduce their armor so your team hits harder, and use your Wither on any enemy champion who is auto attack based to greatly reduce their damage. Now let's look at some of your hard matchups, and first up is Alawi. Alawi will be fairly annoying because you're not the most mobile champion out there, and dodging her tentacles can be somewhat a pain in the ass. Of course, you also are a very short-range champion, so if you do try to all-in her, she can all-in you instead with her ultimate. You are a much stronger champion in the late game, however, so try to pick up as much farm as you can, stack that Q ability, and outscale her. For the next hard matchup, I've got Sion. Sion's a pretty strong champion in the early and the mid game, a lot stronger than you, and he's going to try to zone you off CS with both his E and his Q. Therefore, you're going to have to try to dodge his E as much as possible, and don't run into a fully charged Q. Just like Alawi, you will outscale the Sion for sure in the late game, so just pick up your farm, stack that Q ability, and become better than him later on. For the next hard matchup, we've got the most annoying one, Teemo. This guy is going to poke the crap out of you in the lane phase, he's going to try to blind your Q so you stack it less and less, and he's just going to be annoying as shit. You want to make sure you start with a Doran shield to help with his poke damage and pick up whatever farm you can. You'll probably be a bit weaker in the late game than usual because of Teemo's harassment, but pick up whatever you can and make sure you wither him when you're trying to get a lot of farm so he can't put a bunch of damage into you. And for the last hard matchup here, I've got Yorick. Yorick is a pretty hard matchup because if he gets a bunch of goals with his Q ability and lands his E, you're going to take a lot of damage. Therefore, try to dodge his E ability at all costs and just focus on farming up your Siphoning Strike. Even though Yorick's pretty decent in the late game, you're definitely a stronger champion, so just try to make it there with a powerful Siphoning Strike, and then delete him there. Alright, so let's finish this off with the item build, which starts with either an Ancient Coin refillable potion and a warding totem against an easy lane, or a Doran Shield health potion and warding totem against a hard lane. I'll try to start with a coin as much as I can, but against hard champions you have no choice but go for Dorans. If you started with an Ancient Coin, your core build is going to be the Talisman, Trinity Force, and a Spirit Visage, but if you instead went for a Doran Shield, you want to go for a Trinity Force, Frozen Heart, and a Spirit Visage. You're going to have a bunch of damage in both core builds with just that Trinity Force, and a lot of tankiness as well. You're going to be a little bit squishier with that coin core build, but you will have a really nice way to engage with the Talisman's activation. You will be CDR capped in both core builds. Now you will be a little bit over the CDR cap in core build number 2, but that is definitely the strongest core, and even though you waste a little bit of CDR, it's well worth it. You're going to do a lot of damage with both core builds, be rather tanky as well, with the CDR cap allowing you to stack your Q really quickly, and you'll have that nice increased healing from the Spirit Visage as well, which is great with your passive. For your boot options, you want to go for Merc Treads against high AP and CC heavy teams, and Ninja Tabbies against high AD teams. For the item pool, you first have a bunch of armor options in the Dead Man's Plate, Thornmail, Randuin's, and a Righteous Glory. All are really solid options. You want to take a Dead Man's Plate if you needed some added mobility, a Thornmail against high AD teams so you can reflect damage and apply grievous wounds, Randuin's for a nice AoE slow that also reduces crit damage, which is great against high crit champions like a Yasuo, and Righteous Glory is great if you went for core build 2 when you want some added way to engage. The activation on that item is a lot like the coin and can get you into fights. If you instead wanted to add a little bit of damage and give you a nice defensive shield, you could always go for the Sterax Gauge. Then, if you needed some magic resist, an Adaptive Helm is one of my favorites. It is, however, best against champions that spam the same ability over and over again like a Cassiopeia or a Rise, but it is a fantastic item against those champions. Then finally, if you wanted a really big health pool and some nice regeneration when you're out of combat, you could get the Warmogs. The cooldown reduction on the item would be kind of wasted, however you would have a really nice health pool and some great regeneration. For my example full build, however, I take the coin core build, get the Merc Treads, and get a Thornmail and a Dead Man's Plate. You're going to be an insanely tanky chain with all that armor, health, and magic resist, yet do a lot of damage with the Trinity Force. Of course, assuming you were able to stack up your Siphoning Strike. Then, of course, you're going to have the Talisman, which is a great way to help your team get into a team fight and get on top of the enemies. And that's all I've got for Klepto Nasus in Season 8. If you guys enjoyed the video, please drop a like and subscribe, and visit my video description below. I have a link to all my social medias, and I do also have a Discord server, so those are a couple you should definitely check out. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching the video. I really do appreciate it, so take it easy, have a good day, and peace.